This presentation is on proprietary versus open source. Here we will talk about the ethical debate on open source and proprietary software, the consequences of both sides going to war. We're going to look at the ethical actors here. Who took action? Well, Oracle took action against Google because of Android. Now, they bought Sun Microsystems, which they had the rights to Java. Now, from that, Oracle became the major players in open source. Well, what happened is that they did not like the fact that there's something out there for free that people can widely adapt and they're not going to make any money off of it. Microsoft felt the same way. In their case, they decided, hey, let's make some software that has proprietary code that it can adapt to any piece of hardware. And it had a specific range of requirements that, believe it or not, Microsoft required you to use for Windows to run on or anything they created. Apple is roughly the same way. They create their own hardware and their own software, so you have to buy into both ecosystems for it to work. In the case of Oracle, not so much. You could get away with things with Java, but they own the server market by a huge margin. In open source here, the victims are Google, the Linux Foundation, and basically any open source software foundation. When Google bought the rights to Android, they declared it open source. For the most part, they said, hey, the security layer has to stay with us. That's fine. Now, Oracle decided, hey, that's not going to work for us because you're using our code, which is Java. But a judge woke up and said, no, that should be allowed. It's a programming language widely available for use. Now, Linux is a kernel which is based off of Unix, which is closed source. That has faced some issues because of the similarities in the way they run. Linux basically became a free Unix that you can just do whatever you want with. The benefit to the group for proprietary is the security benefits are apparent with the closed source. Like Oracle, they're notorious for having one of the strongest database systems ever seen. Microsoft usually patches their software within a timely manner. Although nobody really knows what the code looks like, they do, so they can patch it and it can remain a secret. Guys like Apple, parts of Mac OS is open source, but they close source certain aspects of it so they can provide the security updates rapidly. Being that they close off the hardware too, they can also update things, they can fix things with the hardware that's with them, so it's much quicker. The software is always guaranteed maintenance. Every year you can see Apple, Oracle, and Microsoft releasing some major update to their operating systems and so on and so forth. Same thing with their hardware. The advanced research and development, it's paid for. Microsoft, Oracle, Apple, they pay for their development. They pay their researchers to develop and create new products and ideas, which will eventually trickle its way down into our ecosystem. The source code that these guys develop is usually less buggy in this format because they pay their developers and they're basically told your job is to debug and we will pay you for it. So you will see Windows having less bugs. Same thing with Oracle software and same thing with Apple. They do not suffer from as many bugs as the open source guys. Now, the problem with proprietary is, again, we were going to mention how they nearly killed Android because they couldn't make money off of it because it was just using Java. And Oracle was like, no, we can't do this. We need to have our money. But a judge said, no, Oracle cannot do that. Android open source can continue on Java. Now, Microsoft sued Samsung, and they, for some reason, managed to show that, hey, wait a minute, there's patents within Android that are violating our stuff. So Microsoft said, hey, we can now collect $1 billion revenue for every phone that is sold with Android on it, particularly with Samsung. And Apple, as you can tell, when Steve Jobs was alive, he would sue everyone and everything that had to deal with Android. And he said it himself, he will go to war with Android. They felt like their phone was truly superior, and they said, hey, nobody can create what we can create, so if the competition enters, we'll just sue them. The competition in this society, if this is going to go their way, the competition is kept to a minimum. Unfortunately, if Apple and Google and Microsoft, or let's say Oracle, Microsoft and Apple had their way, you would literally see no competition whatsoever. You would have Microsoft on Windows, Microsoft Windows for all of us standard users, Oracle in the server market, and Apple pretty much dominating the smartphone industry with no choice. Again, without the competition, nobody's innovating, nobody wants to create amazing pieces of hardware and software. The high cost of software due to a monopoly, it can happen, because if these guys take over and basically run the industry, they can call whatever prices and we would be forced to pay it. This currently actually happens with Intel versus AMD. Intel basically dominates the market, and you're going to see just ridiculous prices on their things, and the same thing will happen with the software. Now, the walled garden experience once again touches on just basically Apple and Microsoft in particular making you do what they want you to do rather than you changing things up for yourself. The choice of hardware and software becomes very limited because Microsoft and Apple will just push their own hardware, which they're doing right now, and you can't customize it, you can't swap parts as you feel like. Whereas with Oracle, they at least are mostly software based, so you can change your hardware depending on what you need, and your software will have to adapt to what you ask it to. Now, is it an ethically good thing for the general public? People will be paid for their work. The code is maintained because, once again, people are paid. The money is spent on security and research and development. In open source, usually you'll see a Kickstarter or something is donated to. You'll see people asking for money to develop something. People, again, who are working on open source projects are getting money donated to them once in a while so they can continue development on their spare time. Now, what makes it bad is, in the world of proprietary software, these guys can easily charge for whatever they feel like. Once again, greed has become a prevalent thing, and that is because public companies with their shareholders has to say, hey, we want profits. So it's happening, and competition will literally stop at that point. And these guys with too much money will literally sue open source one too many times. And it happens with Apple. They have a big cash pile, therefore they decide, hey, let's sue Google because, hey, they're copying our things. Let's go sue Samsung because they're copying our things. And they just, at that point, when they were doing that, refused to innovate and refused to really try to outdo what Android was doing in its earliest days. Now, in open source, there is no financial security in case of a lawsuit. So in case a guy like me, say, if I want to develop a piece of software and I'm doing this out of my free time, and people, aren't really donating to me, and a big company says, wait a minute, you're stealing our things, and they decide to sue me anyway, well, I have no way to cover myself. Innovation, again, has stopped because of the possible patent infringements on literally anything and everything that these companies keep finding, so nobody really wants to push the boundaries anymore. Open source does not exactly have a legal central support for whatever battles they will deal with, because big companies have had their way with lobbying, and of course laws are not in favor of open source. ethically, no side wins. Proprietary software needs the open source to function. They're both so intertwined that without closed source, open source would have no way to out innovate and to really make you think, well, this free solution is the best way because it's doing all these things for no money. Well, closed source also has the advantage of being super secure and really, really well polished, so they can provide things and services that open source can't in terms of mass scalability. So Google and Oracle, they fought, and Google won, and the competition continued. So Google stayed competitive and really pushed Android to become one amazing operating system against iOS. And then Apple needs Google to go against to innovate their products. They keep pushing the boundaries. Again, the freedom to choose platform is a prevalent thing with Android, so Apple really has to create the best piece of hardware they can. While on the Android side of things, for open source, everyone creates something, so you can choose what you want. In like database system, just dealing with Oracle in specific, you have Oracle versus MySQL. Now, Oracle does incorporate MySQL into their products, which you can buy it, but you can also download your own copy of MySQL for your personal use and for very small uses. So they have taken a little bit of a step back and said, hey, wait a minute, you can use MySQL on your own stuff if you need to buy it for a massive enterprise and to have code maintained and for our professionals to handle it. Well, then you purchase MySQL through them for a fairly discounted price or hefty price depending. Now, in the case of open source and closed source, both sides have gotten so good in security that it is now top notch. So it used to be a question of, wait, open source is not as secure, so let us stick with the closed source guys. Well, now you're seeing that their open source and closed sources are patching their security problems within a day of a discovery or something like that. You know, for every closed source creation, there is a equally good product available on the open source. For every year that iOS comes out with new and improved features, Google will fire back and continuously push small features for every update. Intermittently, or for every year, they will create something new and fresh. As we can see, no side won because, well, the lawsuits have slowed down, so companies are now getting back into the competition and they're just saying, hey, wait a minute, let's just innovate, let's just push each other and not sue each other unless there is a clear breach of patents, and in that case, then you will see a lawsuit. But for now, no side is winning because it's a 50-50.